my friends, and welcome to my January reading wrap-up. I am very pleasantly surprised and able to report that I feel like I read quite a bit of books off my shelves this month, but also like I really enjoyed a lot of them. And I did something throughout the month. I can't remember if I've shared this in the clips because once again I filmed like a weekly wrap-up that I've compiled here for you. But one thing that I did this month that I haven't done in a while is I made sure that I always had an audiobook on the go and an ebook as well as a few physical books. That way, no matter where I was, I always had a book available to me, and no matter what I was doing, I could kind of always be reading within reason. I couldn't always be reading, but welcome to the wrap-up. I hope you guys find some books that sound really good to you in this video, and if you guys read some good books in January, I would love to hear them. Let's get on to all my thoughts on the books that I read in January. Okay, I have finished 2 books to start out the first week of the year. The first one I finished is Divine Rivals. So this one I got on NetGalley, and one of my goals for the year is to get my NetGalley down to 0. I think I had, at the beginning of the year, I had 11 books to read, and then I'm going to decide if I'm going to use NetGalley again. So this is number 1 checked off. So Divine Rivals is a fantasy book, but it feels kind of historical. So there is this war between 2 gods, and our main character, Iris, she's a journalist, and she ends up finding out she has this typewriter that is magical. She ends up writing letters to her brother who is in the war. She puts them in her wardrobe because she doesn't know where to send them, and she ends up getting letters in return from someone she doesn't know. And then at work, she has this coworker that is fighting for the same position as her, so he's her rival. And it turns out he's actually the one receiving these letters, but she doesn't know it. So this has You've Got Mail vibes because they're passing letters back and forth and they are rivals. It feels historical because even though this is a war between gods, the time setting feels like it could be in the 1940s. So it feels like it could be set during World War II. I really enjoyed the whole You've Got Mail setup of this. I feel like the fantasy side of things was like not really fleshed out very much, more so towards the end of the book. It was, there was, other than like this magical typewriter and the fact that there was a war between gods, there wasn't really a whole lot of other magic. There was a little bit like if you go to the store, the things that you can afford will like come to the front of the shelves and stuff, but there wasn't a whole lot of that. I actually would have preferred a little bit more, to be honest. So this is a duology, and I'm looking forward to reading book 2. My biggest hang up, and thankfully I knew this going in. So one thing I'm doing this year is I am attempting. So far I'm on, what is today, January 8th, and I'm successful so far. I'm trying to share a picture of every book that I start over on my Instagram. And this doesn't mean I necessarily like the book. Like, I'm sharing the picture when I start it, so don't take these as recommendations. But someone did mention that there is an open door scene at the end of the book. I think it's like somewhere in the last 10%, even 5% maybe. So I knew going in, or partway through, that this was going to be coming. And it's frustrating to me when this happens because I feel like if you're gonna do one of these, it doesn't need to be there. Like, I feel like if you're writing for someone that wants to read those kinds of scenes, then put more in. But if you're just gonna have one and you're gonna put it at the end, you could have just like done a closed door scene, like implied what was going on. It frustrates me more. It's like swearing sometimes too. Like, I don't mind a bit of swearing in books, but like when an author is just gonna throw that in once or like right near the end of the book, that always frustrates me. And I'm not sure if it makes sense to other people, but it does to me. So I only gave it 4 stars, partially because of that scene, because it just wasn't necessary, and it kind of came out of nowhere because the rest of the book didn't have that. But I am looking forward to finishing the duology. If this was a series like longer than 2 books, I don't know if I would continue, but knowing that it's a duology and I just have to read one more book and I finished it, I'm interested enough to continue, although it will be different. I think some of the things that I like from here probably won't be in there, so Will I continue to like the series? I don't know. And then it snowed, so I had to read Not If I Save You First by Ellie Carter. My daughter has been wanting me to read this book for months, and so I've been waiting for snow. So as soon as it started snowing, I took a picture and started this book. So this is I would say a YA suspense, slightly thriller type book. We have two main characters, Maddie and Logan. So they were friends when they were younger. Logan's dad is the president. Maddie's dad was the head of security or Secret Service. And something happens when they're younger. And so Maddie and her dad actually leave. They move to Alaska. Maddie writes letters to Logan, never hears from him. Then all of a sudden he's at her house in Alaska and things go down. I mean, the whole thing is, it's a suspense thing. So Logan ends up getting captured when they're in Alaska, and Maddie is trying to save him, even though she's really angry for him not responding to her letters for 6 years. And this is I like Ellie Carter's characters. This is just a fun read. I gave this one 4 stars as well. It wasn't amazing, but it was enjoyable. It is a really good book to read when it's cold outside, because they are set in Alaska and like the book has the cold vibes, and I'm trying to get better at reading books that are cold when it's cold, because I'm finding I'm enjoying that. And so I enjoyed our characters. I just like how Ellie Carter writes them. Like, some of them, they could be annoying, maybe if they'd been written by someone else, but I find them fun with her. So yeah, I enjoyed this one. So far we are sitting at a solid 4-star average for the year. 2 out of 2 books, 4 stars, not a bad start at all. This week was a great week for checking books off in a way that some of them are DNFs. I DNF'd 2 books, which I'm going to talk about first, and I finished 4 books of varying sizes, and I don't know, they took varying amounts from me. But we're going to start off with a DNF that I think people might get angry at me for. They're not going to like this. They, as in the general public. I'm sorry if you are one of those people, but I got a decent of the way into All Creatures Great and Small and I quit it. So this is the story about a young vet in, I think it was 1937, 1927? I don't remember what year it was. 1937, yes. And he's in Yorkshire and he gets a job. I didn't enjoy it, you guys, partly because he gets a job with this guy, I don't remember the guy's name now, this other vet that runs the place, that owns this business. I didn't like him or his personality, and I think this is based on a true story. Like, this is based on like his actual time. I didn't enjoy that. And then also, you guys, I grew up on a farm with animals, a dairy farm, and we had cats and dogs and obviously lots of cows, and I didn't enjoy my time growing up on the farm, to be honest. It was partly because I lived out in the middle of nowhere and I had no friends, and so that like plays into it. I didn't have no friends. I didn't have any friends around me. I went from living in town, like on the same street as my best friend, to in the middle of what seemed like nowhere. So I didn't care to relive it. I saw my dad, like, you know, helping cows with their calves many times. Like, reading this, I was like, yeah, been there, done that. I don't need to read it. So I'm going to get rid of it, and I'm sorry. The next book I DNF'd, I actually said this on Instagram. When I posted it, I had already decided to DNF it. The Great Gilly Hopkins. This is about a girl named Gilly Hopkins in foster care, and I did not get very far. I think 7% through this teeny book, and it's just not for me. There's a lot of swearing, which, I mean, I could get over if other things were better, and they weren't. I did not like the slight representation of foster care that I saw in this book, and as someone that has fostered for years, there's other books out there that would be better. So those were my 2 DNFs. The first book that I actually finished was Dune. So I read this, I was supposed to read it in December this was my patron of the month, her pick, and she finished it in December, and it took me a little longer. But I wanted to check it off because I have this kind of slightly arbitrary list of 50 classics I want to read before I die. This one was on it. And it's just one of those books that comes up a lot in life. you know, it seems to be referenced a lot. So I wanted to read it, and I read it, and I don't understand the hype. So we follow Paul. He lives on some planet with his family, his parents, and then they move to Arrakis, which is a planet that is void of water, or has very little water. Water is a precious commodity. His dad is the Duke or something. He's some kind of head guy. And this is just a lot of political science fiction fantasy type stuff. I'm not really into that. I thought, you know, I wasn't minding it, but of course now my card was full. I thought at the end of the book there would be like some kind of big something to make it worth it and be like, that's why everyone loves Dune. I didn't think there was. Whatever. I checked that box. I'm glad I'm done. I don't plan on ever rereading it or continuing it. Is the movie any good? I might do that, but probably not. Then yesterday I finished 3 books. I finished The All-American by Susie Finkbeiner. So this is a not dual timeline, but a dual perspective book where we follow sisters Bertha, who is like 15, 16, and Flossie, who is 10. And Bertha she's really into baseball. She wants to get onto the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, onto the Sweet Peas team. And Flossie is 10. She's really smart. She's a bit of a know-it-all. She has trouble making friends. And we just follow them over over the course of a year. A lot of stuff happens. It's very interesting because this has like no romance in it, which is so strange for a Christian fiction book. Susie Finkbeiner did make me tear up. It wasn't really a question. She's done it in every book that she has written. As someone that really liked and was involved in sports a lot when I was younger, there was a lot that I enjoyed as far as like the team aspect of things in certain chapters. And I played ball as well, so I liked that talk. I did really enjoy this. I think I gave it 5 stars on Goodreads. Then I finished Cat Among the Pigeons. This is our Windy Poplars Agatha Christie book we are reading over on my Patreon this month. And so I'm going to be doing a whole video for those in my Windy Poplars and House of Dreams tier talking about this book. But this one is set at an elite school, an elite English school for girls, and a couple murders take place and we need to figure out why they're connected. This isn't necessarily a traditional whodunit, although I kind of did have some correct suspicions, let me say. But it was enjoyable. I think I gave it 4 stars. Not one of my absolute favorite Agatha Christie, but enjoyable. And the last book, I started and finished this yesterday. It's really short and it's free verse. This is Hidden. Okay, I did rant just mildly about this on Instagram. I do understand the title Hidden. You'll understand it in a moment. But there's nothing to do with leaves or flowers in the story. This drives me nuts because I avoided this book for a long time because it didn't make any sense. But the little blurb here on the front, this did intrigue me when I read it. An accidental kidnapping leaves 2 girls grasping for answers. So what happens right at the beginning of the book is we have 2 main characters, but we start with Wren. She is in the vehicle when her mom goes to the store. There's a gunshot and someone jumps in her vehicle and takes off. The man that is in the vehicle does not realize that she's in there, and so this is the accidental kidnapping. It happens in the first few pages of the book. And he goes home. She's hiding in the back of the vehicle and he doesn't realize that she's in there. So because this book is so short, I don't want to give any spoilers, but he takes the vehicle home. He has a young girl the same age, and she suspects, because there's an article or like there's something on the news saying that this girl has been kidnapped. So this guy's daughter suspects that maybe this girl's in the garage hiding. Of course I got a phone call, and then every time, like, I don't know, you guys, my brain has trouble switching, so I don't remember what I was saying. Okay, well, his daughter suspects that she's in the garage. This girl that's been kidnapped is in the garage. And so she like leaves some food for her. So part 1, we are with Ren. Part 2, we are with the girl Dara. And then part 3, they meet. That's all I'm going to say. I almost gave this book 5 stars. The cover needs to be different. Hidden is a terrible, almost terrible title because yes, Ren is hiding for a bit of the story, but there could have been a better title. I don't know what it is. I'm not an author, a writer. Don't ask me what it is, but Hidden is not the right title for this book. Yes, it almost got 5 stars. I gave it 4 on Goodreads. It's like 4.5. I really enjoyed it. I didn't think it was going to go where it was going. And then when we read Dara, her chapters, what's cool is when you get to the author's note, you'll find this out. But Dara's chapters, they're free verse, but different. So they're longer lines, but there are lines that are longer than others. And the lines that are longer than others, if you read the last word in each of those lines, they also tell a story. So I can tell you this one. It's not spoilery. It says, Dad used to have a job making parts of cars. So I don't know, that's just a really cool addition to the book. I kind of wish I would have known that going in and not at the author's note at the end of the story. So that's all that I read this last week, but I finished 3 books yesterday, so I feel very accomplished. All right, so this last week I was sick. This is very crooked. That's gonna bother me slightly better. So I did some reading, but my brain was not really concentrating very well. So considering how much I was lying around, I didn't really read much. I did read a poem in this book, the collected poems of Sara Teasdale, because I needed a poem for the Buzzwordathon. I wanted to complete the prompt for January, which was there. So that word spelt one of the 3 ways, and I don't own a book with that title. I don't own a short story with that title. I couldn't find a poem with that title. So I had this out from the library, and there's a poem called There Will Come Soft Rains, and I read it. I did hear about this poet, I think she's American, in one of my poetry collections I read last year or the year before. And I want to get my hands on a poetry collection of hers because I really enjoyed the ones I have read. But I read a library book, a library poem, I guess, for this because I couldn't figure out how else to fulfill that prompt. But now it's done. The next book I read is What Happens Next by Christina Suzanne Nelson. This one I've had from NetGalley for quite some time. Like, this book has been out for like a year, I think, already. So I'm catching up on my NetGalley. It's one of my goals for the year. I think I have 9 or 10 books left. So this one is actually quite interesting. So we are dual timeline, triple perspective. So our main character is Faith, set in present day. She's in her 40s. She is a podcaster and she gets approached. Does she get a phone call or a letter or something? I think it's a letter from this one summer when she was 10. She spent this summer with this girl named Heather, playing a lot together. This girl, Heather, lived on the same street as her grandma, and Faith was there for the summer. So Faith gets a letter from Heather's sister, Brooke, saying, like, you know, Heather disappeared right after that summer. I would like some help trying to figure out what happened to her. Faith was never told that Heather disappeared. So this is news to her. She had written Heather letters and they were never returned. So she decides to spend the summer in this small town and try to figure out what happened to Heather. So we are with Faith present day. Heather, we keep flashing back a little bit to that summer. And then present day we are also with Dora, who is Heather's mother. And the whole time I was reading this book, I was like, well, Faith has been gone for 35 years. Heather has been gone for 35 years. It's probably not going to like have a happy ending, but like the whole time I was still holding out, hoping for a happy ending. I'm not going to tell you how it ends, but like it was just interesting the entire time I'm reading the book. I'm like, oh, I hope she's still alive. She can't still be alive. Oh, I hope she's still alive. She can't still be alive. Like I just kept kept arguing back and forth about that. So I quite enjoyed this book. There are some good faith elements. This gripped me. The chapters are really short. I still prefer single perspective books because I would always get invested in the chapter and then it's like, oh, it's over, now we're with someone else. And that's just personal preference. Like I would still just prefer to be just with one character. But I did enjoy this book a lot, and I want to check out some more of her books because she is an advocate for children in foster care and a substitute teacher, which we have some things in common. And so I think at least one of her books has to do with a kid in foster care. So I kind of went against my whole like try to read the books on my shelves and read my NetGalley books and requested that book from the library. So oops. Definitely recommend that. It's like it's got the suspense vibes without anything present day being suspenseful. Like you want to see what happened, but like no one's like really in trouble, or like no one's gonna jump out and say boo, really. So I read that, and then I read this book. This one took me a while, even though it's super short. When Hitler Stole Pink Rabbit, because of the head cold. It just took me a little longer, but this is so good. I can see why so many people love this book. So I didn't realize until it was over that it is a mostly I can't say the word, biographical, whatever, however you say that word, story. So Judith Kerr, a lot of this stuff happened to her as a child. So the book takes place in 1933. Our main character is Anna, and she's 9. Her father is a famous writer in Berlin, and the Nazis are kind of like starting to gain power. But like this is 1933. Like this is such an interesting time period because I haven't read a ton during this time, and he has suspicions that Hitler's kind of up to no good, and he writes anti-Nazi stuff. So he ends up fleeing the country, and his family follows him to Switzerland, and then they also go elsewhere. What I really did like though is that like the time, like they have difficult times. It's not like a super just cheerful, happy, everyone loves that Hitler has kind of scared them away from their country and like that. It's not like that. But Anna sees it all as an adventure. I feel like so often when we have a World War II type book, our main character is very grumpy about moving. And I love that Anna was just seeing it all as an adventure, and she was like, as long as we're together as a family, it'll be okay. Like, yes, she had her share of struggles in the book, but overall, I really liked her attitude. So many funny things. Yeah, I just really enjoyed it, and then apparently it is a series. I don't know how many books there is, but I'm gonna keep my eye out for them because I enjoyed that a lot. This is going to be mandatory reading for my son. I think next year I'll probably put it on his list, and I already told my daughter that like she should read this the next time she's in the mood for like a quick historical fiction, or not really fiction, read. Then last night Holly and Oshina hosted their live reading sprints for their Read in the New Year, and I started and DNF'd this book, Glimpse. It starts out so interesting. So these sisters, they're a year apart. The very first page, so it's like free verse, there's not very many words. The very first page, the younger sister, she's I think 13, walks in on her 14-year-old sister holding a shotgun and like being suicidal. Very gripping right off the bat. I read like 60-70 pages, and then I feel like YA free verse novels just try to throw in too many hard topics, and this is just one of those. Like, I don't know, I really love middle grade free verse novels, but I think YA ones are just not for me. That's what I'm learning. So I DNF'd this one. And then I finished Heartless. I read this one for the food prompt because this one our main character, Catherine, she wants to open a bakery, but her family, they are like the Duke and Duchess. Like, I just finished it. I can never think of titles and things. So, you know, she's not really made to work. And actually the king has his sights on her, but he's a bit of an airhead and she doesn't really want to marry him. This has a lot of Alice in Wonderland infusion into it, I would say. It's not a retelling at all, but a lot of the characters from Alice in Wonderland are in here. So I was curious because Marissa Meyer wrote the Lunar Chronicles, which I really enjoy. Those are gonna stay my favorites. Like, I appreciate that. I like that series more than this, but it was interesting. I will also say that I don't normally like Alice in Wonderland. It's a little too nonsensical and out there for me. I like a little bit more grounding even in my fantasy, but I do like Lewis Carroll's Jabberwocky poem is a favorite of mine, even though I don't like Alice in Wonderland. And the Jabberwock comes to terrorize people in here, I guess. So there's a lot of stuff that I like there. And then I was gonna look this up. I'm gonna look it up. We're gonna research something. So Lewis Carroll invented a bunch of words. Yes, okay, I thought it was. And chortle is one of the words that he invented. Jabberwocky, frabjous, galumph, mimsy. So a lot of them are in the Jabberwocky poem. He invented a lot of them, but chortle is a word that is used today, not a ton, but it was used in here. And when I heard it, because I was listening to the audiobook, I was like, oh, I love that she used that word because it's his own invention. So I liked it. I gave it 4 stars. Not my favorite, but it was a fun read. And the ending, oh, I did not see that coming. Let me just say, I did not see that coming. So we still have like over a week left. I feel like I'm doing pretty good, but I want to read a bunch more books off my shelves. So let me get to it. Okay, 3 more books. We only have a couple more days left in the month, but I should at least be able to finish 1, maybe 2 more books before that, but I got 3 right now. The first one that I read was Out of My Mind by Sharon M. Draper. I actually listened to this on audio. Part of my method to checking a bunch of books off of my shelf is making sure I always have an ebook on the go, although my ebooks have really mostly been NetGalley books this month, but I'm going to change that for next month. And always having an audiobook on the go and always having physical books on the go. So, Out of My Mind by Sharon M. Draper. This is about a girl named Melody. She is 11 and she has cerebral palsy. She can't walk, talk, do any of that stuff, but she has a photographic memory. She's very smart, but people don't know it for like a very long time. Like, her parents know it / suspect it, but there's not a whole lot of communication able to happen. And at one point in this book, she gets a computer that has buttons that she can press because she can move her hand a bit, especially her like thumb and like her arm a little bit, so she can start to communicate. And she starts to go to like inclusive classes at school and goes on from there, I'll say. This is a really good book in a lot of ways. I didn't give it 5 stars like lots of people do. I feel like the author tried to pack in too many hard-hitting things in like the last 10-15% of the book, that like the book was really good already. It didn't have to get harder. Like, Melody's life was so hard. One of the things that I really enjoyed is that this actually takes me back to my childhood a bit, because I had an uncle that was 13 years older than me. He died when I was 7, I think. And I don't really know 100% what he had, if it was really diagnosed, but he had a lot of similarities to Melody. Like, he couldn't walk, he couldn't talk. I don't think he had a photographic memory, but I think he had a lot more going on than we could see. But he was always like super happy, and he was fun to hang around. Like, when we were younger, me and my cousins, we could like sit on his lap on the wheelchair and stuff. So I had some personal connection to this book, but yeah, I just felt like at the end the author threw in things that didn't really need to be in there. Like, it made it so much heavier, and it was so heavy already. So I think this is a duology. I don't plan on continuing but I did enjoy this book. And then I read a James Herriot book this month, DNF'd one, which I just know is gonna be so controversial. Like, so many people love that book. They're gonna hate me. But I did read cat stories. So this was my book for the Read Your Bookshelf Challenge. It has a cat on the cover. I've had this forever. So this is a collection of 10 to 12-ish short stories about different cats that he came across in his veterinary practice. And I loved them. These were sweet little stories. I also own animal stories by him. My shelf is a disaster. I don't know where it is. Somewhere on my shelves I have animal stories, and I'm going to read that. I'm going to get rid of the series that I think everyone's gonna hate me for, but I'm gonna read the short stories. There were some sweet little stories in here. I loved that James Herriot like is a cat guy, and then of course he has like a special way with cats. But the two cats that he can't seem to get through to, like, they just don't like him, are his own cats. So that was kind of funny. Yeah, really liked this. Feel extra bad that I quit the other book. I can't remember what it's called now. All Creatures Great and Small? Is that the one? But it just reinforces the fact that I like this and I didn't like that at the same time. So, going to read his short stories. Not going to read his other books. And then I read a nice, decently sized fantasy book, over 450 pages. This is Lost Kingdom. This one was just released in January. We bought our cat a electric ball, and he can hear it because it's on upstairs, and he's so confused because he's downstairs here with me. Anyway, some of the noise that's going on is this electric ball that's apparently on upstairs. Anyway, Lost Kingdom, we have two main characters. We have Raven and a guy named Jeddick. So Raven starts out in these mines. She's a prisoner. She has no memory of what happened to her before she got to these mines. And this guy is looking for some stone. The king of his tribe kidnapped his betrothed and told him he has to find this stone by a certain date or else she's gonna die. And he finds out that Raven, unbeknownst to her, kind of knows where this stone is. And so this is a bit of a journey story as we follow them lying to each other and trying to find the stone. I really did enjoy it. There were a couple little things that I didn't like that were not essential to the story, so I wish they just wouldn't have been there. But overall, I enjoyed it, and I'm assuming this is going to be a series. It doesn't say book 1 on it, but we were left in a way that the story is not resolved, so I would like to continue this series. If you guys are doing Jade's Polarathon, she's got a couple different teams. One of them has blue on the cover, and the other one has S in the title, and so this one would count for either team. And it does have like cold fantasy vibes, so that works for her polar fantasy. Plus you could be on either team, the blue team or the S team, and it was a pretty fast read. So I would recommend this if you guys like fantasy at all. And then I'm assuming I will be back to tell you about a couple more books. Okay, and then wrapping things up with 3 more books. I actually managed to finish 3 more. I was hoping actually to get another one in, but it didn't quite. I read The Sound of Light by Sara. This is a dual perspective World War II fiction, Christian fiction book. We follow a woman who is she's an American physicist living in Denmark, and a man who, he's from Denmark, and he is a baron, but his life prior to the war and Denmark's invasion was not the best, and so he kind of goes underground and changes his life around during the war. I've read a couple of Sara Sunden's books before, at least 1, possibly 2, and I've enjoyed them. This one, I enjoyed a lot of the storyline. I loved being in Denmark. I don't think that I've read a World War II fiction book set there during the war, so that was interesting. But the romance for me in this book was just too much. And if you guys have been here before, you know, like, I'm not really I like a slow burn romance. This one, there was some things to it that just made me realize just how much I don't like it when the romance just takes over in a book, and there was portions in here where it did, and I don't know, I felt like it was just too much in places. Yeah, so I think, did I give it 4 stars or 3 stars? I don't remember. Definitely not my favorite of hers. If it had been toned down a bit, I would have really, really enjoyed this one, but unfortunately it was a little much for me. Oh, and this is also a NetGalley book. I think that means there was 4 NetGalley books I read this month, which is crazy. I never do that. So I'm checking off those books off of my list. The next book I finished was You Are Only Just Beginning by Morgan Harper Nichols. This is a book of poetry and kind of a bit of an art collection as well. She does all the art for the backgrounds of her pages, and this one is separated into different sections. They're different lessons from sunlight, lessons from elephants, lessons from the ocean, etc. And then after each lesson there's a bunch of poems related to that topic. It was pretty good. I still think her first book, All Along You Were Blooming, is the best, but I would put this one down as my second favorite. I read it slowly over the course of the month, a few poems kind of here and there, and then tried to finish it up at the end. There was a number that I really enjoyed, got quite a few tabs in there. I find her poetry really inspiring for writing poetry and being creative in general, and that's what I wanted to get out of this book going into it, and I think I accomplished that. So I overall enjoyed this, but still think her first one is the best. And then, do you ever read a book and you just like, as you're reading it, and then when you finish, you're just like, that was so much fun. I enjoyed that so much. That's what I get every time I hang out with Mrs. Pollifax. This one was a poem for Mrs. Pollifax, and in this one we go with her to, oh, where did we go? Switzerland. She goes and hangs out at a clinic undercover. If you haven't heard me talk about Mrs. Pollifax before, she, in her 60s, decided to become a CIA agent, and she keeps getting sent on these different adventures. They read like cozy espionage stories is what I call them. And Mrs. Pollifax, she's just so fun. Like, she studies human character quite a bit, and she notices things that other people don't because of it. So as I was reading this, as I finished it, I was just enjoying my time with Mrs. Pollifax, seeing how she would get herself and the characters out of scrapes. Oh, she surprises them with some of her karate moves. Oh, it cracks me up so much. You have to like just let yourself believe a few things could work out the way they do. But it's so much fun. And everyone asks me every time I share the books, and I would say from up until what I've read, and I've heard even farther, that reading these books in order is really beneficial. So read them in order and get to know Mrs. Pollifax, and I hope that you love her as much as I do, because she's just a blast. So there you have it. That is my wrap up for the month. A bunch of really good books, some that I loved, and I would love to hear some of your favorite books from the month. Leave them in the comments, and thanks for hanging out with me today, guys.